and I didn't think things through. So, but here's what I'm going to ask y'all to do this morning, we're going to have to think. Like, one of the things we're going to do this morning is we're going to think. Like, we're going to put our thinking caps on because this is the reality. We're talking about, here's the theme, God is, last time we talked about God is joy, God is faithful, God is present. We're going to hear the whole weekend about more things about what God is like, when He is. But the first thing we have to know is God real? Like, that's the big question, right? Like, is God real? Does He really exist? Because if He doesn't exist, then we can say, God is joy. Whatever. Or God is faithful. I don't know. I don't feel Him being faithful. Or you can be here today, or last night, or whatever, and I can ask you a question. How would you respond right now, if I asked you the question right now? If I were to say, is God real? Okay. Would you say, yeah? Or would you say, is God real? Now, here's the thing. I appreciate the fact that you made an effort. That was really good of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that some people were like, yes! And last night, like, if I were to ask you, is God real? They'd go, yeah, He is! I love it! Why? Because I was playing music! That means God's real, man! Like, no. Here's the deal. If my faith is based off of a feeling, if my faith in God's existence or God's faithfulness is based off of a feeling, then my faith is only going to be as strong as that feeling. Again, if my faith is based off of emotion, I know God is real. Why? Because I feel Him. Then my faith is only going to be as strong as that emotion. So what we need to do as Catholic Christians, we have to do this. We have feelings, we have emotions. Those things are good. They're part of us. But we cannot come to truth by feeling our way towards there. We're using the wrong tool. It's like this. Wait. Do you guys smell purple? You smell purple? You can't smell purple in the same way that you can't feel the truth. You can't feel your way to the truth. You have to think your way to the truth. You have to think your way to the truth. Now, our feelings can sometimes correspond with the truth. For example, I'm loved and I feel loved. Okay, great, that's perfect. But have you ever had this in your life where you know you're loved, but you don't feel loved? Or have you ever had this thing where, like, you're trying to go to bed at night and you've already checked under the bed, you've already checked in the closet, and you know there's no one there, but you still feel afraid? Yeah, sometimes our feelings mislead us. And so what we need to do is what we absolutely need to do is we need to think our way to the truth, because I'm going to make this claim that God is real. Now, if you're going to believe that's true, I'm going to invite you to believe it for only one reason. I would invite you to believe in Jesus for only one reason. Because He is true. Because He actually is God. Because the only reason to believe anything is because it's true. Not because it makes you happy, not because it makes you good, not because it helps you sleep at night. The only reason to believe anything is because it's true. So here's the question. What is truth? This is going to be a little philosophy 101. So get your brains going, right? So philosophy 101. What is truth? How would you define truth? I can define truth. I want to define truth in 2 words. So just make it really simple. We're going to define truth by 2 words. 2 words are this. Truth is what is. Okay, so truth is simply what is. And so a statement is either true or false to the degree that it conforms to what is. Does that make sense so far? So if I were to say, there is a podium on this stage, does that conform to what is? Yes, so is that statement true? Yes. If I were to say that there is a microphone on this stage, does that conform to what is? Yes. If I were to say there are 8 microphones on this stage, does that conform even more accurately to what is? Yes, so that recognition of being able to say that, again, a statement is either true or false to the degree that it conforms to reality. Now, here's the deal. A lot of times we have this thing where we say, like, have you ever heard this? Ever heard something? Ever? I get so excited, you guys. I just can't control myself. Have you ever heard someone say, well, that's fine, that's your truth, but my truth is something else? Have you ever heard that someone say that? That's your truth. You believe in Jesus, that's fine, that's your truth. I don't, that my truth is different. No, that's something real. That's an actual thing. There's 2 kinds of truth. One kind of truth is called subjective truth. That was a little philosophy. Here's a grammar lesson for this morning. Subjective truth is that there are subjective statements. Subjective statements are things like this. I like Caribou coffee. I like driving a little bit over the speed limit. I like Papa John's pizza. All those statements are true, but they're subjectively true because all those statements are about what? They're about me, exactly. Well done. They're about the subject. They're about I. I like Starbucks. I'd say, well, I like Caribou coffee. Well, I like Starbucks. Well, I like Caribou coffee. I'm like, okay, fine. Walk away. That's because if all we have is subjective truth, what I like, what I'm feeling, what I experience, if all we have is that, when it comes to conflict, we only have three options. One option is this: I like Caribou. I like Starbucks. I like Caribou. Whatever. Leave. Just walk away. The other option is this: I like Caribou. I like Starbucks. I like Caribou. I like Starbucks. I'm right. Because I'm stronger. Or it's this. Third option is either we walk away, we fight each other, or we say this. Y'all know what Caribou coffee is? Okay, some of you do. How we say this? I always say, okay, you guys, everyone in this arena, who thinks Starbucks is better than Caribou? Raise your hand. Okay, who thinks Caribou is better than Starbucks? Okay, so what we have is basically mob rule. So whatever, the most people say, that's right, and that's right. But that's not right, is it? That's not a way to come to truth. So all we have is subjective truth. It never brings anyone together. It only brings us apart, because either we walk away, we hurt each other, or we just have a mob against another mob. But the great news is there's not just subjective truth, there's also a thing called objective truth. And objective truth is something like this. You can get a medium coffee at Caribou for $2.16. The speed limit outside of this, on the street, outside of USD, is 30 miles per hour. Or you can get a medium pizza at Papa John's for $15.99. Now those statements are all objective statements because they're statements about an object outside of me. Now, keep track with me. They're statements that are true independent of me. For example, if the speed limit outside University of San Diego is 30 miles an hour, if I don't know that it's 30 miles an hour, does it cease to be 30 miles an hour for me? No, I have actually a student at our university that I work at. She got pulled over by a police officer and she was going like 45 and 30. And her excuse was this: I didn't know. And he wasn't like, oh, in that case, I understand. He was like, it's your job to know. Like if you're on the road, you drivers, if you're on the road, it's your job to know the speed limit, right? And the thing is this: the speed limit is 30 miles per hour, whether I like it, whether I know it, or whether I believe it. That's the thing about objective statements. If they're true, they're true independent of me. They're true whether or not I like it, whether or not I know it, or whether or not I believe it. For example, we're all here inside. If it was snowing outside, this is Utah from Minnesota. If it was snowing outside, you could say, I don't like the snow. Would that change the fact that it was snowing outside? If you didn't know that it was snowing outside, would that change whether or not it was snowing outside? If you didn't like the fact that it was snowing outside, would that change whether or not it was snowing outside? No, because if something's objectively true, it's true regardless of whether you know it, like it, or believe it. So, here's this deep, profound thing. When it comes to the truth of God, is God real? Here's the question. If I were to say the phrase, the statement, God exists, is that a subjective statement or is that an objective statement? It's objective, exactly. Now some people will say like, well, that's subjective. Why? Because people disagree. Well, yeah, exactly. Some people say, objectively, God doesn't exist. Other people say, objectively, God does exist. Question for all y'all. Can both of them be right? No, not at all. Because here's the second little philosophy lesson of the morning. There's this thing called the principle of non-contradiction. Now, if you get this right, you'll get so much in your life right. It's called the principle of non-contradiction, which means this. Get your pens all ready, type it out on your phones. It means this. A thing cannot both be and not be at the same time and in the same way. I will repeat that 4 more times. A thing cannot both be and not be at the same time and in the same way. Because I always say this to my students, I always have to say the in the same way thing as well. Because I'll always have like the smart aleck student, which is what I used to be. Someone will say like, okay, what about if you had the lamp? A lamp that was on a table, but it was turned off. It's both on and off. Busted, Father. Like, no. At the same time and in the same way. So, if the lamp is on the table, it can also be off the table. Amen? So, God cannot both exist and not exist. And here's the crazy thing about this. Sometimes we just like to say, well, that's fine. If God doesn't exist for you, then that's whatever. But God exists for me. We can't both be right. No, some people don't care. Some people don't care about whether or not God exists. In fact, I was doing a marriage prep with this couple, and she was raised Catholic, and she was trying to live out her faith a little bit. He was raised Catholic, but he left, and he said, I'm an atheist. I do not believe God exists. This kept coming up in our marriage preparation. It was like every time I kept bringing it up, like, you realize you're marrying each other. You really disagree. You really disagree. Finally, one night, we're talking, and I said, you realize I'm really concerned about this because you're about to covenant yourselves to someone who believes that when it comes to the most important question in life, they actually believe that you are wrong. You're about to marry someone who, when it comes to the most important question of life, whether God exists or not, they actually think that you're wrong. And the groom, he looked at me and he said, well, I don't think it's the most important question in life. And I was like, exactly, that's the point. Because so a lot of times you have atheists, you have new atheists, and I'm not bagging on atheists because they're just sincerely held belief, but I want to say this. I want atheists who are better atheists. What I mean by that is this. If someone's going to be atheist, I want them to take their atheism, their statement that God does not exist, I want them to take that to the conclusion. What are some conclusions to the statement? What if God didn't exist? Here's my groom who says, I don't think it's the most important question in life. What changes if God doesn't exist? I want to say at least three things change. Here's the three things. If God doesn't exist, what does that mean about the universe? It means that all there is in the world is just matter. It's just stuff. That there's no spirit, there's no soul, there's no beings outside us. All that's in the universe is just stuff. If all there is in the universe is just stuff, that means that at the moment of the Big Bang, all of us is, you've heard the theory of the Big Bang, right? So all the matter in the universe is supercondense, this ball, this size of a grapefruit or whatever, and then it expands at this explosion, rapidly expanding exponential rate at a certain temperature and a certain speed. Now, if all there is matter, then all the matter in the universe existed at that moment, which means this. At the very first instant of the Big Bang, the entire future of the universe was predetermined. Here's what I mean. If all there is matter, then all there is physics. I don't know, I'd recommend playing pool with a physics major because they will kick your butt. They're so good. Because why? Because they know how physics works. It always works this way. If you hit the ball, or the balls in this speed at that angle, it will always do this. So here's the thing. If at the moment of the Big Bang, the first moment of creation, all there is matter, it just expands. All there is for the rest of history is just stuff hitting stuff hitting stuff hitting stuff. Which means all that's going to be is physics, which means that the entire universe has been pre-programmed from the very first moment. So here's the thing, there's the crazy thing about that is this. Are you part of the universe? Yes. Is your brain part of the universe? Yes. Which means that all there is stuff. If there's no God, you're simply a part of the universe. And what you're thinking and what you're doing has been pre-programmed as well. Because your brain is simply atoms hitting atoms hitting atoms. It's just stuff hitting stuff hitting stuff. Which means that there's essentially no such, if there is no God, all there is matter, there's no such thing as free will. Now, you might think, no, people don't really believe that. There's a guy, an atheist on my campus, who believes that he's what they call a determinist, which means that everything has been predetermined. Why? Because all there is matter. It's just stuff hitting stuff hitting stuff. It's just physics. And he's at the point, it's crazy, it boggles my mind. This guy is a professor at a university. Why it boggles my mind is this. If you think that the whole universe is pre-programmed, why would you teach? Because it's just kind of pre-programmed, right? Not only that, he teaches ethics, which is like right human behavior. But if you don't believe in such a thing as free will, there's no such thing as right or wrong. If there's no such thing as free will, there's no such thing as right or wrong. That's the second conclusion of no God. If there is no God, there is no free will. But if there's no free will, there's no such thing as right or wrong. Because you can't blame me for doing something, I have no choice. And you can't praise me for doing something, I have no choice. If there is no free will, there's no right or wrong. I'm just doing what I have to do. Think about this. If you went up to a pop machine, and your pop machine, you put your money in, press the button, your pop machine doesn't give you your pop. You stand there and say, now see your pop machine, we had an agreement. I was going to give you my $2, you're going to give me your pop. So let's reason this out. Would you argue with the pop machine? No. What would you do? You kick it. Exactly. So if there's no such thing as free will, and you have a disagreement with someone where you say, I think your coffee is better, and they say it's not, what do you do with them? Do you try to reason with them, or what do you do? You kick them. That's what you have to do. Okay, if there's no such thing as God, there is no free will. There's no free will. There's no right or wrong. There's just what is. The third consequence is this. What is doesn't mean anything. It's ridiculous. Oh, take me back to 2007, right? It's completely ridiculous. If there's no God, that means there's no meaning. Here's what I mean. A number of years ago, I went down to North Carolina we have focused missionaries on our campus at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And I was meeting our new team, and so we wanted to do a team bonding exercise. So they took me out, they said, Father, we're going to go to an art show and an art gallery in order to bond. Because there's nothing that bonds people better than shared misery. And so, it was great. I love art. I just don't like postmodern art, because postmodern art is kind of like, here is a toilet seat. I did that. Like, look inside. I did that. Like this recognition of like, what does it mean? So I'm walking through this thing going like, I don't know what anything means here. And then finally I stumbled upon this painting. It was huge. It was like 15 feet by 15 feet. And all it was the color red. And it was striking. It was beautiful, you guys. So honestly, I stood there and I was like, wow. I stood there for 15 minutes. I'm not exaggerating. Looking at the color red. I didn't just stand there like, I stood there like an art person. You know how art people stand? One hand kind of around the waist. The other one stroking your chin. And then nodding. Art. So I must have looked like I knew what I was doing, because these two guys walked up to me, and they walked up and they're like, they'll sell me into it. So they asked me, what do you see? I'm embarrassed, but for the next 15 minutes, I describe the color red. Well, here it is. This red is just passionate. There's a couple smudges there. That's probably like, brokenness of the human condition. I mean, for 30 minutes of my life that I will never get back, I looked at the color red. Now, I talked about for 15 minutes what the painting meant. But if I really wanted to know what the painting meant, who would I have to talk to? The artist, exactly. If I really wanted to know what the painting meant, I would have to talk to the artist. So imagine, she walked up, it was a woman. Imagine, she walked up and I said, okay, I just went off about what this painting means. What does it really mean? What did she look at me and she said, actually, there's a funny story about that painting. It was just a canvas I had laid out. I was going to paint something else. But I've got these cats. And they knocked over this red paint. I hung it up to dry and it just kind of, I was like, that's pretty. So I hung it up in the gallery. So basically, the painting means nothing. The painting was an accident. I mean, if the painting was an accident, even if I find meaning in it, does it mean anything? No, because if it's an accident, there is no meaning in it. Yeah, I might say, but I see something. When it comes to the universe, if the universe is just an accident, it was a random thing that just happened to explode at one moment in time, and now here we are. Even if I find what I feel like is meaning, like I love this person, or I'm suffering in this way, or whatever, I have this kind of joy. If the universe is an accident, does it have any meaning? No. If there is no God, that means the whole universe is just an accident. If you ever have younger siblings who are like 2 years old, and they have an accident, do you look into that for meaning? No, you don't. You don't say like, what is this? What does it mean? It's a double rainbow. Almost a triple rainbow. Like you wouldn't look into an accident for meaning. And if the whole universe is an accident, that means basically the whole universe is just a dirty diaper. If the universe is an accident, if God doesn't exist, that means this whole planet is simply literally, well, virtually, a pile of crap. And you are a nice little speck on that pile of crap. So I don't believe it's the most important question in life. Okay, I'm talking to the bride at this point. I'm like, okay, so your husband doesn't believe, or your future husband doesn't believe that God exists, which means he doesn't believe in free will. But in a couple weeks, he's going to promise to love you forever. Maybe. He doesn't believe in right or wrong. But he promises he's going to be good and faithful to you. What does that mean? And he doesn't believe that there's actually a meaning to the universe. But as some point he's going to look you in the eyes and tell you that he loves you. He's going to hold your child and say this means something. But none of it means anything. If there is no God, there's no free will. There is no right or wrong. There is no one. But the great thing is this. I would say that's false. I would say God does exist. I would say that God is real. Not only because of this, not only because you realize, right? You had a choice this morning of whether you're going to have orange juice or milk. You had a choice this morning whether you're going to get up or stand. You're going to have a choice this morning whether you're going to stay awake right now or go to sleep right now. You have a choice of whether you're going to listen to that urge that says, I have to go to the bathroom. Or you're going to say, no, this is so amazing that I want to stay here. You have a choice. We realize we have an experience of free will. Second thing is this. You know there's a difference between right and wrong. Sometimes you disagree with what that is. But you know that there's some things that I just should not do. There's some things I should always do. You know this. And at the heart of hearts, we sometimes realize that this world is confusing. We don't know what it means. But we always have the sense that it's got to mean something. Our experience tells us that there is meaning, that there is right or wrong, and that there is free will, which tells us what? God is real. God is real. I mean, some of the greatest minds in history, I mean, I'm talking the best scientists, the guy who invented the Big Bang Theory, he was a Catholic priest. Not the TV show, but the actual, Big Bang Theory. The person who was the father of modern genetics was a Benedictine monk and a priest. One of Albert Einstein's closest friends were Catholic priests who were scientists. The Vatican has an observatory where they study physics and they study astronomy and astrophysics. The Catholic Church is a friend of the sciences. It's amazing. In fact, I don't know if I said this, the scientific method was developed by guess who? The Catholic Church! I'm not taking credit for it, I'm just saying, But this reality is this, is that faith and science are not opposed, and the greatest minds, the most intelligent people in the history of the universe, the history of humanity, many of them have been Catholics, have been people who believe that God is real. And here's the crazy thing, God isn't just real. God isn't just real. He's here. God isn't just real. He's not just this mysterious force. He's not one of he's either Shiva, or he's Zeus, or he's Apollo, or he's, Krishna. But at one point in history, God reveals that he's come on this earth as one of us. This is crazy. I want to make the claim of this. I grew up in college, I went to college, and I used to take a number of classes called comparative religions. In a comparative religion class, what you do is, okay, all these religions that believe that God exists of some sort, here's all these, so you look at Hinduism, and Buddhism, and Taoism, and Hinduism, and Islam, and Judaism, and Christianity, and you all look at them next to each other, and all look at them as if they're the same thing. But the crazy thing is this, one of those religions is definitely not like the other. Out of all these religions, in world history, all the religions on the face of the earth, one of them is entirely unique. Guess which one? Christianity. Christianity is entirely unique. It's different than every other religion. Why? Because in every other world religion, someone came along and they said this. They said, either I have a revelation from God, God told me such and such, or they would say, I have insight from God, or insight into God. I kind of peered into this, I thought about it a lot, and here it is. But Jesus came on the scene. And unlike anyone else, he didn't just say I had insight from God or a revelation from God. Jesus came on the scene and he said, what? I am God. That God is real and that I am him. So here's the thing. We look at this book of comparative religions. We have to say that, okay, here's one person who says, I have a revelation. Another person says, I have a revelation. Here's Jesus who says, I am the revelation of God. I am him. He doesn't just say, look to my teachings. He says, look to me. Which is crazy. I mean, think about this. If someone were to come out in this room right now, if I were to come on the stage and say, hello everyone, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to me, no one comes to the Father except through me. Would you say, okay? A lot of times that's what we think. We think that when Jesus was when he's on the face of the earth, that he came along and he said this. He said, before Abraham was, I am. That Jesus came on the scene and he said, if you want to live forever, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. And people were just picking their nose okay, Jesus, that's great. That's how people did, because people back in the day, they were so dumb. I mean, they didn't know how to use iPods. They didn't know how to program VCRs. They would have believed anything. They didn't believe anything. In fact, if someone came into this room and said, I'm God, what would you make them do? Prove it, exactly. You would say, no, listen, hold up. You need to prove this. So what does Jesus do? He proves it all throughout the Gospels, especially the Gospel of John. John said that whenever Jesus does a miracle, he doesn't call it a miracle, he calls it a sign and a wonder. Which is crazy because what does it mean, sign and wonder? What do signs do? Signs point to something. Jesus makes them, what do they point to? They point to the claim that what he said is true. Jesus comes on and says, I have the ability to forgive sins. I'm God. I can do this. Remember that story of the paralyzed man, his friends lowering him on the back? Jesus looks at the guy and he says, your sins are forgiven. And they look at Jesus and say, who but God can forgive sins? And Jesus is like, I know, right? He says, but to prove to you that I can do this. Why? Because I'm God. He says to the guy, rise, pick up your mat, and go home. And the guy picks up his mat. I love the fact, not only can the guy move now, he already knows how to walk. Double miracle, 2 points. Like, keeps going. Jesus, he talks to someone, there's a guy who's deaf and he can't speak and he can't hear. And Jesus walked up to him, and I love the story. It says Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ear and touches his tongue. Imagine me for that deaf guy. You see Jesus coming towards you? You're like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing, Jesus? And he touches, and the guy can hear. There's a couple of stories in the Bible where Jesus comes upon someone who's dead. There's a little girl, she's 12 years old. There's this young man. And there's also Jesus' best friend named Lazarus in John chapter 11. In John's Gospel, Lazarus has been dead for how many days? 4, exactly. Bible scholars. He's been dead for 4 days. And Jesus goes to the tomb of Lazarus. And he doesn't even go up to Lazarus. Like, I would think that Jesus, if he was going to resuscitate him, like bring him back from the dead, Jesus would go up and say, okay, Lazarus, CPR, clear, breathe, All he does is he does this remote control resurrection where he just says, roll away the stone. And all these people are like, no, Lazarus has been dead. He's as dead as any dead thing that's ever died, Jesus. We know what dead looks like. And even Martha in the Bible, she says, we also, Jesus, know what dead smells like. Not really, he's not going to smell good. Jesus says, roll away the stone. Then he looks into the tomb and he says, Lazarus, come out. And then in John's Gospel, John's like going nuts. Imagine, if John was like me, he would have used like 12 exclamation marks and underlined the whole thing. A bunch of smiley faces with a bunch of parentheses, like, and he says, the dead man came out. Jesus is like, yeah, I know. Why? Because I am who I say I am. Who do I say I am? I say that I am God. And I'm proving that I am God, so much so that the moment when Jesus poured his life out, died for us, that was not the end of the story. Because not only can he resurrect this little 12-year-old girl, not only can he resurrect that young man, not only can he resurrect his friend Lazarus, but Jesus Christ himself was raised from the dead. And this is, you guys have to realize this, this is an historical fact.